Good evening, good afternoon, whichever it is for you. Welcome to North Carolina Vietnam Veterans Incorporated, Lessons of Vietnam on a nice, chilly, icy day, night. School's delayed again tomorrow. And
2 hours.
of course, in North Carolina, if you think there's going to be snow or ice, the world stops and revolves around it. We have a special show tonight. We think we have a special show every time we came home. We just recently did a symposium with the North Carolina History Museum here in Raleigh, and it was called The Early Battles, or Vietnam and the Early Battles. We had three outstanding guests on our panel. Really excited, and what we're going to be doing tonight is talk a little bit about the show and build up to the show, and hopefully the next show we do, we'll be able to show you part of it. We'll put the whole thing online so you can go online and see it. But I got a call today, Bob, that really hit home a little bit. Those of you out there who remember our Agent Orange shows, we did several shows on Agent Orange. I got a call today from a Vietnam vet and said that how he had watched that show over several times and how much he appreciated that show and the information he got, and enabling him to go out and get the help he needed and the work with the veteran service officer that he needed to get the benefits that was due to him. And I think that kind of gives us a little encouraging that we're doing some of the right thing. We're trying to put these shows together, Bob.
Well, Bill, when you get a call like that, the reason we did the show was exactly for that reason, to give people that are a little bit mixed up, maybe a little timid, to go and ask for something they don't think they deserve. A lot of veterans have never used VA benefits, and they're afraid to go down. They're afraid to be turned down. They read the news stories and all that. Those two shows that we put together with the information and all that, I am so glad it helped a lot of people. I know it helped me.
Well, that's we try to get this information out not only for veterans' use, but we try to make sure that the shows are something that are in our course that you started, Lessons of Vietnam course that's in 1,000 schools nationwide, and that those students and the teachers there can also go online and get some great information and listen to some great veterans and so forth speak, which is what we did with the symposium. Joe Marm, basically the symposium was about the Drang Valley, one of the early battles. There were some battles before that, which we'll kind of go over tonight, but the Drang battle, which was made famous from the movie We Were Soldiers Once, excuse me, and that Mel Gibson and Sam Elliott were in, and everybody was the author of that. One of the authors of that was Mammoth Joe Galloway, but unfortunately left out of the movie. It was kind of conglomerated in. There's a lot of things left out of the movie, even though it did do a good job. Was a man by the name of Joe Marm, who lives here in North Carolina now. Yeah. And of course, we know that Joe Marm received the Medal of Honor, was shot through the jaw at leading a group to trying to rescue that lost platoon that everybody saw. And he had a lot of good information to put out about the three men that all were there together at the battle together, and they were able to feed off each other.
Sure.
Something like what we do when we get together and talk and so forth. They were able to feed off each other and come up with some interesting information, some humorous information, a little bit of everything. We did talk to him a little bit about Sergeant Major Plumley, which was a pretty colorful figure in himself. Yeah. Joe Galloway did his always great job. A lot of people don't know that Joe Galloway is the only civilian to ever receive a Bronze Star with V on it.
Exactly right. I was hoping you'd make mention of that because I was so impressed by not just the three men there, but the opportunity to listen to these stories. And you mentioned the course Lessons of Vietnam. One of the hallmarks of our course is for our teachers in our school systems to take advantage of first-person history, to bring in individuals that lived through something you're teaching about. And what a perfect example at the Museum of History the other night when you had Joe Marr, Medal of Honor winner, Joe Galloway, a veteran, if not one of the most famous war correspondents of the Cold War and the Vietnam War itself, and Clifford Haskins, who lives in Raleigh.
Yeah. Well, the thing about Joe, not only Joe spent 18 months in Vietnam. Now, when he spent his 18 months in Vietnam, it was just not sitting around. He was actually in combat almost the entire time.
Yes, he was.
When he got back from our Drang Valley, what did he do? He goes out with another group. Where the first Cav guys got a chance to get a little bit of a break, he was back out with another group. He was actually with a group leading up to the Battle of our Drang Valley. At Play May, he was actually involved in that battle.
Yes, he was.
Which led to the our Drang Valley battle. And it's kind of funny, even though both of them were at the battle, Joe Marm and Joe Galloway were at the battle, they never met.
No, never met.
One of the reasons was that Joe Marm was medevaced out, we think, on the same helicopter that brought Joe Galloway in. So if they met kind of passing as Marm was put on the helicopter, Galloway was getting off. And that was kind of a passing in the night, I guess.
Well, you've heard the expression before about making history come alive. Joe Galloway underlines the word colorful.
Yes.
I mean, when he tells a story, you're there with him.
And puts himself into the story. He got very emotional.
Yes, he did.
A few times.
Yes, he did.
Talking about it, but he can crack a joke and wipe a tear at the same time. It's
yeah, he's very good. Bad Joe Galloway.
Yeah. And he actually covered, after Vietnam, he was embedded, I guess they called it, with the Iraqi Storm and Enduring Freedom, all the first Iraqi War, all those. He was still involved in those. He's won all kinds of awards. But the thing that got left out of the movie quite a bit, and as Joe covers and Hal Mortar covers in the book,
sure,
was the day afterwards, which was what Cliff Haskins was talking about. When you see in the movie when Joe Galloway not Joe Galloway, but when Hal Moore or Mel Gibson puts his foot on the helicopter, says we've left. Well, what they don't show you, there's another whole group of Americans on the ground.
Right.
There, they went in to replace them. And somewhere along the line, the powers that be decided they didn't want them to leave by helicopter. They were going to march them over to a new LZ. And basically, they got strung out, and a lot of men died that day.
Yeah.
They were strung out over about 5 miles, from
right,
what I understand, and going into landing zone Albany. There were a couple others. They were captured two North Vietnamese prisoners. The colonel leading the march out went up to the front of the column to interrogate them. He interrogated them and found out that they were one of the they found out one of the landing zones was right next to a bivouac of a North Vietnamese battalion.
Right.
And
well, that's when it got real quiet in the auditorium, when Mr. Haskins was telling about not the slaughter, but losing men, and maybe there was some miscommunication.
Well, the problem was that the colonel called all of his squad leaders and their RTOs or telephone operators or radio operators up to the front of the column. And the men were all scattered along, and then they all got ambushed. It was like 5 soldiers here, 10 soldiers there, and in elephant grass. And if you haven't been in the elephant grass, think about yourself walking into a wheat field with wheat that's about anywhere from 6 to 10 feet tall, and see what you can see. You don't see much of anything.
And sharp as razor blades.
Sharp as razor blades, and but the bullets go right on through them anyway.
Yeah.
And we lost a lot of good men that day.
Well, it's amazing. I have had the privilege over the years to meet a couple Medal of Honor winners, but this fellow here, Joe Marm, and I hope our audience will take some time when we're done tonight and look some of these things up we're talking about. Could you have met a man that was more modest than Joe Marm?
No,
what he did?
I mean, for just a real gentleman. We've heard him before. We've actually sit with his family
yes, we did.
At one of his speeches before. One of the men that was also first Cav, was not in that particular battle, was a member of ours, who we wanted to make sure that night that we remembered him.
Sure.
Bob Cox, who has Parkinson's disease as a result of being wounded while with the first cav, and then he recently fell and broke his hip, so he was in a nursing home. We had a special presentation for him, but which we'll have to do a little bit later.
Yes, we will.
As we go along tonight, I just want to let you know, if I could look weirder than normal, I just getting over the flu. They said elderly people should not be getting the flu, and I'm not quite certain what an elderly is.
You're not contagious.
But I am. I think I am getting on the threshold of elderly, and I can tell you, whatever age is, you do not want it. So, just if you can skip it, just skip it. I don't take the flu shots because I get sick when I do take the flu shot. So I didn't take it this year, but this year's flu shots only, they picked the flu shot, but then the flu that came along and it's a different virus. The flu virus that actually, the flu is different from the virus they give you the shot for. So they say it makes you not as sick. Well, I'm glad it makes you not as sick because I didn't have it and it didn't work. Anyway, we're going to kind of go over the first battles with you tonight. I'm going to ask our chief producer, Nissan here, Mr. Nissan, to up to first grade. All right, and if you move on to the second grade. Now, I got a question for you, Bob.
Yes.
When did the Vietnam War begin?
I didn't know Vietnam was a war.
Well, it wasn't.
It was never declared, was it?
It was never declared war. I don't know what exactly the difference between an engagement or a whatever what we were supposed to be over there. But I think when people are shooting at you and people get killed, and so I would consider that a war.
Well, I think they're serious about it, Bill. And I think when you talk about this, and we've talked about Vietnam so much in the classroom around the country, it's often referred to as the Vietnam War, as Korea is the Korean War.
Yeah.
If you want to nitpick, neither one were declared by Congress as wars.
I think they call it the conflict.
They do. The
I
Vietnam
was pretty
conflict.
conflicted when I was there.
I'm still conflicted.
Yeah. So the question goes back. We're in the process, as most people know, we're in the process of the 50th commemoration of the Vietnam War. Well, how did they come up with the date? I mean, you would think, and we were there during the World War II. Should it start then? Should it started in 1956 when Hanoi and there was a North and South Vietnam divided up, and North Vietnam attacked South Vietnam? Should it been in 1956 in June when the first American was killed, who's the first man on the wall? Sergeant Richard B. Fitzbottom was the Air Force guy. He's the first casualty on the wall. I mean, should that be the time? Or how about the Gulf of Tonkin incident in 1964 in August? Would that be the time? I mean,
Well, that's another bone of contention, if that even took place.
yeah, well, that's true, but it kind of got us going.
It did.
Well, as most of you can read the thing there, it's in 1998 they got together, and the heads and the smart people, the educated ones, got together and going, when did the Vietnam War start? And they came up with November 1st, 1955. That was the day when we basically changed from being advisors.
Yes.
The American soldiers were no longer advisors. They were full-fledged combat troops, even though a lot of Americans had died previous to that. But that was kind of when they decided that they just kind of picked the number and go, let's use this date.
That was way back in the Eisenhower administration.
Yes. And but May 7th, 1965 is when they changed from advisors to full-scale combat lines and so forth. So that was a big day. And
Sure.
Even though we had been fighting, and it was just we kind of took over and told the South Vietnamese, just y'all do your thing, we'll do our thing, somewhat. So. Well, what about you're a Pennsylvania native, but let's talk a little bit about, since we're in North Carolina, and we did this with North Carolina History Museum, 1,612 men and women, we'll say, from North Carolina lost their lives in Vietnam. North Carolina was one of the top states in the country during the War of the Northern Aggression. Some of you people call it Civil War, but us Southerners call it Northern Aggression.
You do.
We led a number of casualties for that, and North Carolina has always been known as a military state.
Yes, it
You know,
has.
and I think it is a military state. It's not necessarily a veteran state.
No, no,
I
no.
think our legislators have a problem understanding that what the active duty military need and what a veteran needs are two totally different things. They're always talking about, let's pass this law for our troops. Well, they don't seem to do that for the veterans and so forth. I mean, you look at the problems with the VA hospital and so
Sure,
forth
sure.
and so on. But
Well, what North Carolina has also become is a lot of military personnel retire here.
yeah.
With Fort Bragg, Goldsboro, the big Air Force base there, and different installations on the coast.
Well, you know, there were 216,348 men who, from men and women from North Carolina who served during the Vietnam War. But we also had the distinction of being training some of the original people in Vietnam. It was the Special Forces
Yes.
at Fort Bragg. They were started in 1961. I guess that's along about the time that Kennedy took them from the CIA and made them their own fighting unit.
That's exactly right. John Kennedy.
Did that, and they were known as the Green Berets. Of course, everybody saw the movie with John Wayne, the Green Berets. As students out there, if you haven't seen the movie with John Wayne, go see the Green Berets. And then we also have another special recognition in North Carolina, Bob. Tell the people about Dan Bullock.
Yes, Dan Bullock, born in Goldsboro, North Carolina, was the youngest man to die in Vietnam. He lived here till he was 12 years old. He was dreamed of becoming a pilot, police officer, or a Marine. He was 14 years old. He changed the date to get into the service. He went to Vietnam. He graduated from boot camp in '68. Bullock arrived in Vietnam in 1969. And he was the youngest man to die in Vietnam, his real age, but he was killed. He was 15 years old.
21 days after he got to Vietnam, he was killed during a firefight at night on a struck by rifle fire and was killed instantly in a firefight. And
21 days.
21 days after he got in the country. He is now buried in Goldsboro, and there's a couple of Vietnam vets who live in the area who took very good care of his grave and so forth.
Dan Bullock.
But if you look at that picture of him, he definitely looks like he's older than he was. And then another famous Vietnam veteran is someone that you reported on at the symposium.
Oh, yes.
Tell us a little bit about the battle he was in and who he was and so forth.
I'll be honored. The man I want to talk about next, his name is Lawrence Joel, and he won. I shouldn't say won. It wasn't a contest. He was awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions at the Battle of the Iodine Valley and the Battle of the Hump, where he was a medic. And he has a couple of distinctions. First, he was the first medic to receive the Medal of Honor in the Vietnam War. He was also the last living black American to receive the Medal of Honor since
The first living, not the last.
The first one.
It wasn't the last. It was
Since the Spanish-American War. And as those of you that live in Winston-Salem or the area, there's so many things dedicated to him. Like they call this place the Joel. It's a Lawrence Joel Memorial Coliseum where Wake Forest plays basketball. They were on the other night, and it came on and it said, the Joel. And this was after our symposium. I was talking about this young man who was wounded twice, was given the Silver Star, 2 Purple Hearts, and the Medal of Honor. He was an E6 medic at the Battle of the Hump. And when he retired from the military, he lived for several years. He died of complications of diabetes, and he's buried in Arlington Cemetery. But when you're looking things up and checking on things in our state, we have some deep roots. And Lawrence Joel is a true hero. At Fort McPherson in Georgia, at Walter Reed Hospital in D.C., at Fort Knox, Kentucky, there are medical wings and clinics named for him nationwide. He's a true American hero from North Carolina, from Wilmington, one of 18 children.
Well, you know, Bob, as much as we have just talked about Lawrence Joel and what he's done and so forth, and it just everywhere all over the country things are named after him. It seems like everybody else knew more about him than we did.
Yeah.
Had it not been for a song by Big and Rich, they did to commemorate a friend of theirs, Myles Harris, called 8th of November.
Right.
If you, by the way, you are to listen to that song. Chris Christopherson does the the opening of that song. Chris Christopherson, who was also served in the military and was a Rhodes Scholar.
Yes, he was.
But he does a great opening to that song, 8th of November. A lot of good men were in that battle, and 48 men died that day during the Battle of the Hump. For those 2 days.
48 paratroopers, Bill, in over 408 Viet Cong. Yeah. The battle was a success. It was a search and destroy mission, and the paratroopers, 82nd Airborne, drove the Viet Cong back into the hills. They accomplished their mission. It was very costly. 48 Americans died.
Yeah. In the next couple of pages, we'll give you some information on the Medal of Honor that Lawrence Joel was given. But I do want to point out several things. We've looked up information about the Battle of Hump, and it's like anything else when it comes to a battle or the war and so forth, depending on where you get your sources.
Yes.
We looked up, and it said 43 were killed. And then we looked at another source that said 48. One write-up on Lawrence Joel said he was shot in the leg initially. He wounded it. He bandaged his own leg, gave himself morphine so he could take care of his fellow troops. Went out during the battle, went right out in front of the bullets flying everywhere, holding up plasma. And one source says he was shot in the lung, and another source says he was shot in the hip. Basically, he was shot twice. That is known for certain. Whether he was shot in the hip or shot in the lung, the man refused to have be medevaced. He stayed with his men and fellow men. A lot of men would have died. Myles Harris, excuse me, spoke very highly of him and said he saved his life.
Yes, he did.
There is a artist who is now down in Jacksonville by the name of Craig Bone. Yeah. Craig did a painting of the Battle of the Hump, 8th of November. And in that battle picture he has several pictures of soldiers that are kind of hidden away.
They're camouflaged.
And there are camouflage. There's a picture of Myles Harris and Big and Rich in there with their top hat that Myles Harris gave Big, I believe it was. So if you get a chance to see one of those, we do have those posters. We'll have them at our next symposium for you to see. Pick up one if you like. But Craig Bone is a fantastic artist, and we hope maybe we can get him in sometime.
You know, Bill, after the symposium the other night, we had 2 or 3 people in the audience from the Triad, Winston-Salem, and they've been by and been in the Jewel many times and never had an inkling what it was named for. It was, when they had a parade for Lawrence Joel, it was the largest parade in the history of Winston-Salem. And this is something that we as North Carolinians should take note of. And one of our jobs is to give more information. But next time you're in Winston-Salem at a ball game or driving by and you see the Joel, just nod your head. You're driving by an American hero.
Saying we have a question. We have a question come in? Okay. You want to go ahead? We'll go ahead with a question if you've got it ready.
Yeah, I got a question.
All right.
I was in basic training in June of '68, so I actually went to basic before the kid from Goldsboro went in.
You mean Dan Bullock?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was at Bragg, and I'm sure he was at the.
Well, he was in the Marines. He went through Parris Island, I believe.
Yes, he did.
Parris Island, yeah. What impressed me about the people we had at the symposium was how a lot of stuff came out that the movie took Hollywood on it more. And I asked the question whether the commander actually led a charge on the final assault. And Joe Galloway said no, he didn't do that. That he actually went down, had his men get down on their knees, and look for 2 soldiers that were missing, and he said that he would not go home unless everybody went with him.
Yeah, that was one of the things that they kept emphasizing in the movie, that he was not going to leave. He promised them before he left the United States that he would bring them all home.
Yes, he did.
Right.
And he went out and did look for his wounded or his killed men and made sure that they were all loaded on the helicopter before he got on the helicopter. As that was actually depicted in the movie. But as you said, the charge at the end where the helicopters came in, were shooting up the North Vietnamese soldiers and so forth, didn't quite happen that way. But it looked good on the movie.
Well, sir, that was Hal Moore's famous statement, "I'll be the first man off the chopper and the last man on." And he honored his word. Yeah. And, you know, we talked about the movie in Hollywood, how it embellishes history, and it does, but it teaches us a lot of things, too. We can ask better questions, like you did at the thing the other night. But Mel Gibson was interviewed a couple years later after this movie, and Mel's had several great movies, Braveheart, all these kinds he's done, a lot of awards. He said this was the finest thing he ever did. And I think it was, too. I watched it again the other night. It was
really a good movie, and for people that spend any time in combat, they didn't realize what those guys went through there at the I Drang. That was hellacious for those 3 days. I can only imagine what it was like, not being in a situation like that. But the I Drang was a major battle.
Sure, it was. It certainly was. One of the other big aspects of the movie that was planned, that Joe talked about outside in the lobby a little bit, Joe Galloway, was they emphasized on what went on at home. Those who waited for letters, how they were informed, how things like that happened. Behind-the-scenes story sometimes are really good. They're heartfelt.
Well, you know, the movie showed the cab driver coming up with the telegrams.
Yes, it did.
But in real life, he was so distraught about having to bring them, he actually got drunk and fell off Hal Moore's wife's stoop before he even got there, and that's when she took over because he was so upset about having to deliver those.
They left that out of the movie, didn't they?
Well, it did go to, you know, that she took him over because he knocked on her door, and the first thing she goes was, Hal's been killed. And then when she found out it was somebody else, of course, and that's kind of how that part of the story, she had to deliver it. And that took a pretty strong lady into itself, so a real leader in her own part.
Sure, it certainly did.
What a lot of people don't realize is that was being spread across the United States for 10 years. So, you know, that kind of stuff happened not only at the I Drang, it happened every time a soldier was killed in combat. That kind of stuff happened all over the country. So to sit back and you can't sit back and say that our families didn't go through the Vietnam War with all of us.
That's true. That's very true.
Okay. Thanks a lot, guys.
Appreciate you calling in, and keep listening. You might want to call in with another comment or question.
Well, I'll try.
Thank you.
It's kind of like the next thing we want to talk about is when was the first major battle. It's kind of like when the Vietnam War started. If you were there, it was a major battle.
I think it started the first day you walked.
If it was, if it was Mama Son with a broken Coca-Cola bottle, it was a major battle. If you were there with Mama Son in that broken Coca-Cola bottle.
Well, someone asked that question the other day. When did Vietnam start? And they said, for you, I said, when a plane landed.
Yeah.
When did it end?
Well, actually, for me, it's when I got on an airplane in California, as far as I was concerned. Because I started counting my time. That time, my flying over there counted as a day closer to home. And so
365 and a wake up.
Yep. So, you know, what exactly is a major battle? Is it on the number of people who were involved? How many get killed? I mean, is it a skirmish? Is it an ambush? Is it a firefight? Is it just a run-in, an engagement? What exactly makes it a major battle?
This is one of the bones of contention. When we started to put this course together, Lessons of Vietnam, you refer always to World War II, where the battles were distinct. They had names, they had places, they had endings, they had winning, they had losing. Vietnam was very, very devious. You couldn't find battles, but you eventually did find them. And I think I'm right when I say this. We never lost a battle in the Vietnam War.
Well, you know, I agree with you. And overall, our Drang Valley was a definite win for us.
Yes.
But the men who were on the march out, who so many of them who lost their lives being marched out rather than leaving by helicopter.
They lost.
But even though we got our butt kicked there, overall the battle, I guess we won because we definitely gave the NVA, the PAVN, People's Army of Vietnam, not the Viet Cong, but this was hardcore trained troops who had almost the same stuff that we had as far as uniforms and weapons and so forth. They had those things. We talked a while ago, we talked a little bit about the different battles coming up and so forth. We got a couple more battles we're going to be talking about. They were major battles at the time.
Yes.
But the Ardrang Valley was the first big, this new army we had, this new air mobile.
Air Cav.
The Air Cav group, Air Mobile. This was the Ardrang Valley was the first big challenge of that, which is what we're coming up on pretty soon, was why it all came about.
What they said, we're not going to walk anymore, we're going to ride.
Yeah, we're going to go ride back and forwards to the into battle and so forth. And also, one of the nice things about that is you got a wounded soldier was able to get back medevac into someone taking care of him so quick.
That's one of the stories about the Vietnam conflict that we probably haven't spent enough time on, is how many men, especially men and women, I always say, but especially men, were blown to bits and saved by the medics. It was unbelievable. Those guys were angels.
Yeah.
They came down in there and got the men out quickly as possible and saved so many thousands of lives.
Yeah. You know, the first battle that we actually have record of as being a fairly major. Well, I won't say, don't use the word fairly, but it was major to the Marines. In August of 15th, 1965, they learned that the Vietnamese, the North Vietnamese, were going to attack the Marine encampment at Schuette.
Schuette, right.
And one of the things we had a problem was the South Vietnamese general got the information, and quite often when you passed information down the line through the Vietnamese, nothing against the South Vietnamese, but it was hard to tell the good guys and the bad guys, even for them sometimes.
Yes, it was.
So the word got out what was going on before the Americans did. Well, this general went straight to the Marines and said, this is what's going to happen, and the Marines led this assault without the South Vietnamese even knowing about it, and it was quite a success. It was codenamed Starlight.
Starlight.
The Marines went in and did classic Marine stuff. They had the Navy with their guns offshore, on the ships out there, keeping the Viet Cong or the North Vietnamese from retreating in one other way. They used gunboats, the PBRs.
Sure.
They used swift boats. They used, of course, the came in with their troops and so forth. And according to, they were not quite the air mobile group of the first Cav, but they came in, and at what they did was at 6:30 in the morning, before they even started attack, they artillery just started going off. Artillery and the ships did 18 tons of bombs on the area they were going into before the American Marines ever went in there.
They softened it up.
And softened up pretty good, I would think. But there was still a pretty big battle. The first day was the biggest part of the battle, and then after that it was kind of skirmishes and so forth. But the Marines learned a lot during that period of time of fighting, because up until that time, of course, they had not landed at Red Beach too much before that. So
exactly.
And just like we talked about a while ago, intelligence. There was a lot of intelligence gathered in Vietnam, but I'm not certain where it went out that was gathered.
It was gathered, but it wasn't. I don't think it was very precise, Bill.
It wasn't always disseminated to where it needed to be.
Exactly.
But in that Operation Starlight battle, Corporal Robert OMalley was the first Marine to receive the Medal of Honor in Vietnam during that battle. Now later they went back and got a captain who and awarded him posthumously the Medal of Honor So he was actually got a Medal of Honor before OMalley did, but OMalley originally was the first
Yes, he was.
Marine to receive the Medal of Honor as a result of the activities in Vietnam. So the Marines had an early on battle, Operation Starlight, and you can read about information about that online. And now we're the part of what kind of got everything going, all the wheels moving. It's that perfect storm for the Iron Valley battle.
Yeah.
In 1963, when we had those Special Forces guys going in, Bob, that were trained at Fort Bragg and stationed there, they went in just outside of Plaquemine City, which I believe you're familiar with.
Oh, yes.
You spent some time at Plaquemine.
Yes, I did.
They went to a base camp there, Special Forces base camp. Base camp is basically where Special Forces come in to regroup, rest a little bit, send out a team here, send out a team there. I think there were like 12 Americans usually to a camp, and then a couple hundred or so indigenous people in that area in the Central Highlands would probably have been Montagnards.
It'd be Montagnards, yeah.
So that base camp was very critical to the movements of Special Forces there. And so that was, and it was kind of set up as a fairly small camp, trying to triangular shape and so forth.
Yes.
And as the 1st Cavalry gets there and starts setting up and so forth, the North Vietnamese kind of want to find out just how this new 1st Cav, these helicopter work and so forth. So the 1st Cav gets in the country in September of 1965, and they come in on ships. I forgot how many. It was a phenomenal amount of helicopters and men and so forth that Joe Marham talked about. It came in. It was mind-boggling. It was thousands of men and equipment and so forth. And they actually had to come in and build their own base camp, chop it out and out of the jungle and so forth. And before that, while they were setting up camp and so forth, in October of '65, the Camp Playmay had 12 U.S. Special Forces and 400 Montagnards there, and the North Vietnamese decided they wanted to use them to find out about this 1st Cav group.
Sure.
So they came up with the idea of overrunning the Special Forces camp to bring out the 1st Cav. And they also used some of the old North Vietnamese tactics they knew that wherever they were attacked, that the Americans were going to send in reinforcements.
Sure.
So they set up ambushes to attack the reinforcements group coming in.
Right.
Well, the first attack on Playmay was beat back, much to their surprise. So instead of overrunning them, they just kind of put the base under siege. And then a very famous Special Forces guy came in, Colonel Beckworth. He was a major at the time.
Very famous.
Very colorful soldier. If you ever get a chance to, if you take a chance and go in and read about Colonel Beckworth's story and so forth, he was very outspoken. He didn't care what general he spoke to. He always spoke his mind. But he came in, and they came in and with a team of South Vietnamese Rangers and brought in supplies and so forth. And the battle went on for about a week.
It did. It's a long battle.
And to kind of keep mop up a little bit is when they brought in, oh, by the way, I did mention while I go back to ambushes, they sent in South Vietnamese Armored Personnel Carrier Group, and they were ambushed on the way in twice. And there's another guy that came in with on a helicopter after that, during that period of time, after Beckworth got there. A guy by the name of Joe Galloway, I believe was his name.
I believe that was his name.
Yeah. And,
Bad Joe Galloway.
And kind of like he went into to Iron Valley kind of after the fact. And I can imagine what Beckworth had to say when he's out there calling for more reinforcements, more weapons, more food, more water, and a reporter
a reporter shows up with with a microphone.
With a microphone. I know that went over well with the colonel. But from what I understand, the colonel made him an infantryman very soon after that, and a machine gunner.
The mic went down, the rifle went in his hand.
Oh, yes. And
Case closed.
Yeah, Beckworth was quite a... and the next couple of pages after that is the remembrances of Joe Galloway at the battle and so forth. I'm not going to bother to go over all that stuff, just to say that it basically, the North Vietnamese army retreated, which is how we got to Ao Drang Valley, because then the 1st Cav, 7th Cav of the 1st Cav, if you remember Custer's 1st Cav, well, that was Hal Moore's group.
The 7th Cavalry.
They came in to mop up and finish search and destroy the North Vietnamese and the unit and so forth. So at that time, the North Vietnamese got a great opportunity to find out how the 1st Cav fought.
Yes,
and
they did.
It all led back to Ao Drang Valley.
It did.
To the mountains and so forth there. Ao Drang, is in the Montagnard is the same thing as river.
Yes, it is.
The river of Drang.
Or, as we say, Riva.
Yeah, down to the river. And I think one of the things that also be pointed out was when after the North Vietnamese started retreating and Beckworth was there, and the 1st Cav was going in. Galloway actually went out with the 1st Cav trying to mop up.
He did.
And they found, we started using body count quite. That's when we kind of started using body count. How you could tell whether you won or lost if you killed more of them today than they killed of you. And they found North Vietnamese machine gunners chained to their machine guns so they couldn't leave. And that's kind of how the way the communists fought. And
I guess that's called forced loyalty.
I guess that you're pretty loyal if you can't get up and leave. You got to stay there. You either fight and die. But that's what led us to the day, November 14th, 1965, at approximately 10:48, is when Bravo Company, Joe Marm's group, landed on LZ X-ray in Ao Drang Valley.
That is certainly a piece of history. And at the symposium, they kept referring to being star-crossed, the 7th Cavalry. They knew the history. Most of them do.
Yeah, when the battle first started, everybody reflected back on Custer.
Custer's last stand. You're exactly right.
Like the Lost Patrol and that was there, and the Lost Patrol had real, and the officers were all killed right off to start with, and a young non-commissioned officer or sergeant kind of took over and saved his men, and how hard they tried to get to him, which is where Joe Marm was wounded.
Yes, he was.
He actually shot a light atomic weapon into an anthill. Now, when you think of an anthill, you start thinking about shooting a rocket into it, and it doesn't even do any harm to it. You go, what kind of anthill is that?
It's a fairly large anthill.
It's about 7 feet high, 8 feet high was not unusual.
No, not at all.
And big. It's almost like a sandcastle.
Like a bunker.
Yeah, and so that's kind of how we all got down to the first major battle of Vietnam, Ao Drang Valley.
Yeah, another phrase that came up. Do you remember what Joe Galloway said when they called Broken Arrow?
Yeah. Yeah, that, if you saw the movie or if you didn't see the movie, when American forces are getting ready to get overrun, flu's kicking in sometimes. When they're getting ready to get being overrun, the idea was, to call in every available airplane, helicopter, anything else you can get, sampan, whatever,
everything,
to come to aid. And that's when they came in, and those 3 guys who were there at the battle, there you go, there's some helicopters coming in right now. Those guys all stated that the artillery is what saved the day for them.
Well, when you call Broken Arrow, nobody has anything else to do. That's first priority.
Yeah.
Everybody, every branch of service, every mobile unit, every plane, every chopper goes to that scene now.
Yeah. Well, Bob, that's and hopefully next show we're going to have those three guys as a panel answering the questions and telling their story and so forth. But we got a couple other things coming up. Also, we have another symposium coming up in February, and we want everybody to come to that one. And that's going to be very special too. We've got some friends of ours who've been on the show before. Tell us a little bit about that symposium on February 9th.
Yes.
North Carolina Museum of History from 6 to 8 at the Daniels Auditorium right there as you come in.
We take a lot of pride in this one coming up. We take a lot of pride in all of this as they come up to our play called Etchings in Stone. But on February 9th, between 6 and 8, we have a real treat in store for you. We have 3 POWs, 2 American and 1 South Vietnamese, who will be speaking to the audience. We have Mr. Bill Schuette. We have Mr. Norman Gaddis. And Bill, the Colonel's full name is?
He was, and during the war, when Saigon fell, he was Major Hein Vo.
Hein Vo. So we'd like you to put that on your calendar. February 9th, 6 till 8 at the Museum of History in Raleigh. We have some nice books to give away there, nice mementos, but more than this is the opportunity for you to sit and listen to 3 men that served several years in captivity, fighting for freedom. And now they're back in the United States, telling their story and sharing their history with you. I know a lot of times you never have a chance like this your entire life to talk to somebody like this and ask a question. And believe me, these 3 men you'll talk to, you will not forget this. I've talked to them several times, and they have filled a hole in our course, Lessons of Vietnam, the POW MIA story. We couldn't tell the story like they can.
Well, you know, Bill Schuette was a POW for 7.5 years.
Yes, he was.
And went through a great deal there in Hanoi. And Colonel Hein Vo, he's a colonel now, but in a different organization that he with the United States Military Assistance Command Group out of California.
Right.
But he wants to talk about basically starting in '54. He understands communism and what communism does. He spent after the war. When the day Saigon fell, he went directly from machine gun to somewhere between 10 and 15 years in a re-education camp or POW camp for South Vietnamese. He loves Vietnam. He hates the communists more than anybody I've ever seen. If you really want to get him going, get him talking about communism. He gives me. I have that pair of Ho Chi Minh sandals I bought. I always like to display those because people are interested in them. He always gets mad because those are communist sandals.
He hates them.
So he gets mad with me when I show it.
You put them out, he puts them down.
He's going to be there and telling his story. This is 3 opportunities of 3 men who have such unique stories that you're going to be able to come in and listen to, and then even more important afterwards, have a period of time that you can ask them any question you want.
Yeah.
They're there to answer questions. We got some really good questions with the first symposium. Some people that were, a lot of guys that were combat soldiers that were there, actually were involved with the first cav and so forth. They had some great stories. And
we also had the opportunity on this show to have Bill Schuette on, and we also brought on his wife, who sat home for 7 years and waited for Bill to come back. And she was magnificent. J.D. Schuette, they were wonderful. So this is a real chance for the people of Raleigh and Cary and so forth to get down to the museum and see some living history. Most seminars are fabulous. They lead to a play coming up called Etchings in Stone in March. We'll talk more about that later with Mr. Ron Harris, the playwright. But it looks good, Bill. It's working nicely.
We're very fortunate that the History Museum, North Carolina Museum of History,
yes,
which also has the Sports Hall of Fame in it, North Carolina Sports Hall of Fame in it.
That's great.
The History Museum is a great place to go visit at any time. But they are 50th anniversary commemorative partners, and we are 50th anniversary commemorative partners. And this opportunity to get together and share North Carolina story and the Vietnam story and the men and women who fought in Vietnam from North Carolina and with North Carolina Ties is a great opportunity for you to bring young. I won't say young children. I think high school children, high school students are good. It may be a little bit much for maybe a middle, depending on the maturity of the middle school. But it's an opportunity to you come in yourself and find out the real history of what happened in Vietnam and not the academic history.
I'll tell you a little example here. The first symposium, you said middle school. My grandson was in Cooper, and he sat through it, and there was some salty language, of course, but we came home, it's all he talked about. So middle school is apropos with a chaperone.
Yeah.
But, you know, the one thing we've talked about for a long time is we take a lot of pride, North Carolina Vietnam veterans, on having our course of study in over 1,000 schools nationwide, and we have been called the finest course in the nation. We take great pride in that. We've worked on it for 20 years. Can you imagine when we started where it is today?
Oh.
And now we have the opportunity to chaperone and shepherd some of these things in Raleigh with our course as a backdrop, with the two symposiums, bring in these examples of living history, bring in a play one of our members wrote. We couldn't be more proud of our legacy. And we're not done yet. We're trying to
We've worked hard to do these things over the years. And unfortunately, because we are a small organization, even though we're probably more active than anybody else, it's been hard to get the word out and get the credibility because we're not a national organization. We're not, nothing wrong with the VVA. They're a good organization. They're a national organization. We don't have the power and the oomph they have because we're just a small group of men and women here who have been very dedicated over the years to educating the public, reaching out and tell the real stories of the men and women who fought in Vietnam. And we just hadn't had the credibility that was necessary. In fact, we've had more credibility in other states than we've had here when we go travel and so forth.
Well,
and the museum has really given us some credibility.
Nice platform.
Yeah.
Nice platform. Well, Bill Dixon, Joe Harsh, and myself have spoken at several national conventions with Lessons of Vietnam, and we tell our story everywhere, from Seattle to St. Louis to Boston, and we're heading next November to the great town of New Orleans.
Yeah, if you get on the airplane with us, you don't even try to have don't even try to read or anything. We're going to tell you the story. You're going to know about North Carolina and Vietnam. About it. If you're in 3 or 4 seats on us, we're going to teach you about Lessons of Vietnam. If you're down, because we get the whole airplane involved before it's all over with.
And I cannot thank you enough for coming to this, listening to us, taking some notes. I know I'm always a teacher, but sometimes when you give people information and they get it wrong, you don't want to correct them. You want to steer them in the right direction. And part of this is giving people a chance to look things up. Look up Dan Bullock. Look up Joe Marm. Check out Custer. Check out Joe Galloway.
You know, we had a lot of pages in this in our display tonight. Didn't expect you to sit there and read them, but it gives you an opportunity to go back online to ncvi.org, and which we forgot to give out the telephone number tonight as we were so excited about our show. But you have a chance to go back and read some of the stories about the Battle of the Hump, 8th of November, and so forth. So it's always there for you to go back later and so forth. As you probably know, those who've been tuned in for some time, the first Saturday of every month for the last 27 years, almost 28, we meet the first Saturday of the month at the Vietnam Memorial downtown Raleigh at the Capitol Building. There's another nice memorial in Greensboro, but we meet at the Capitol Building where we call out the names of the 41 men who are still missing. Well, February 7th, 2 days before our symposium, we will be having the North Carolina Helicopter Pilots Association reading the names. Come to that ceremony and talk to some of the helicopter pilots. Talk to them. If you're a helicopter pilot, be sure to come in and shoot the breeze with those guys. They'll be there reading the names. They'll be there a little bit before and a little bit afterwards. So come down and meet some helicopter pilots. I tell you what, it takes a nerve of steel to sit there in that helicopter because it takes both hands and both legs and the people shooting at you to sit right there and stay still.
And a shout out to the Wake County teachers. I know the second semester starting next week, and you're gearing up for the Lessons of Vietnam in second semester. We have 12 high schools teaching it and several middle schools. As Bill mentioned, go on ncbvi.org. All the information is on there. We got a request today from Chapel Hill. We'll be speaking there, we think, next week. But we speak everywhere around the state in your classes. We'd love to come in. So give us a shout, and we'll oblige you.
And I want to ask you to do another favor. As hard as it is to believe, we've been doing this now for close to 20 years.
20 years.
With the lessons of Vietnam, it's like I said, we've been recognized all over the nation and so forth. But we have some local teachers who think who say that they don't need live speakers to go in because they can teach their students all they need to know. If your school has a Lessons of Vietnam course and your teacher is not bringing in live Vietnam vets, not necessarily NCVI, but living history, live veterans to talk to the students, you need to get on the phone, get off the phone, go to the school, knock on the principal's door and say, what the hell's going on? I'm a little French there. I do speak some French.
You do speak French.
What's going on?
Very fluent, by the way.
Why do you have this research and you're too stupid to use it? To put that French, nice and French. I'm not a teacher like you were, but I cannot believe a teacher sits back and says, I don't need Vietnam vets because I can teach my students anything that you can teach them. How many of you teachers out there know how to burn crap? I'm an expert at it. How many of you teachers out there have had a leech? I have. How many teachers out there have been blown up with an ammo dump? I have. Can you teach the students that? Parents, other people out there, help us get this course in more schools. The kids today need to understand about war and what it's all about. It's a dirty, nasty thing, but it's part of our history. Now you can polish up what I said.
I will. And also keep in mind that...
Mr. Diplomat.
Yeah, I'm a diplomat. Living history is very much part and parcel of the Common Core curriculum coming down throughout the nation, where every community, every school digs deep and they mine their community and they bring in primary source people. This is right in line with what you're expected to do on your lesson plans, what your objectives. Isn't it something to look around your community and see people who you can use as primary sources? You open up so many doors and you are so valuable as a teacher. Take it serious. I taught a long time and I'm still teaching. You're very valuable. We need you. Mr. Dixon?
That's pretty much what I had to say. It just totally wipes me out. We have an organization, or can get Joe Marm, Joe Galloway, Cliff Haskins, men who have lived the history, Bill Schuette, Norman Gaddis, live history, heroes. Students today look up to athletes who are getting all kinds of trouble. And here's a guy that spent 7.5 years in a re-education camp. And you actually have the gall to stand up and say that you can tell the students better of what it's all about. This man who spent 7.5 years, there ain't enough gall in the world.
What I always say about Mr. Bill Schuette and Norman Gaddis is when you spend 7.5 years in a hole in Vietnam, it's hard to have a bad day. These men are heroes. Take our invitation to heart. Tell your friends. Tell your co-workers. We'll see you February 9th at the Museum of History in Raleigh. Be a great night.
We'll look for you at the next symposium. You have no excuse for not being there now. We've told you all about it. Our next show will be on the original symposium. Put down on your calendar right now. Don't delay. Don't even start. Don't even start looking at a state game. I think state is playing somebody tonight. But we already know state's going to win, so you don't have to spend that time. Just go ahead and write down on your calendar. February 7th, POW ceremony. February 9th, symposium at the North Carolina History Museum. Take a friend to the History Museum. And then put down March 27th, 28th, or 29th for a great experience at the North Carolina History Museum, Etchings in Stone. Thank you for tuning in with us, and we'll be more calm next time.
Stay warm and put on the chili. Have a good evening, and thank you very much.
Mama, we're coming home. Thanks.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, Health In with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVBI members, The Tanya Love Show, Your Healthy Pet with Gisela DiCarlo. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it at www.nissancommunications.com. Sponsored by Atomus.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters for professionals, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.